So apparently private equity firms are entering college sports. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Let's assemble the squad.
You're talking ball with the ACC squad, sponsored by Game Time. From Florida State to North Carolina, from Syracuse to Miami, and from NC State to California, it's the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network, bringing you scoops, breakdowns, and the most comprehensive preview of the upcoming ACC weekend. Hang on, it could get loud, it could get heated, and it will definitely be fun. Squad up, you're part of the ACC squad.
This is the Locked On ACC squad. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. Of course, we're joined by Kenton Gibbs, the host of Locked On Wolfpack and former NC State defensive tackle, and JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Duke Blue Devils, and Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers. And on today's show, each one of us are going to give the biggest surprise of our football team's offseason. Hey, Syracuse fans, I'm going to trigger you all. I'm just warning you, okay? I'm going to trigger you all with the surprise of the offseason for Syracuse football. But first, we are going to talk about private equity firms entering college sports because this is all brand new to literally everyone. So that's what we're going to talk about here on this edition of the ACC squad. Now, before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So late last week, the House settlement, predictably, it passed, and that is going to allow colleges to pay their athletes directly through revenue sharing. And one of the ripple effects of now colleges being able to pay their athletes directly is that private equity firms are getting involved in college sports. Now, for those that are unaware of what this means, what are we talking about here? Well, normally a private equity firm, they buy a stake of a company and they trim some fat out of it, then they resell it for a higher price, and that's how that private equity firm stays in business and makes a profit. Well, with them in college sports, what they're going to do or what they're planning on doing is invest money into the team. And in return, instead of getting an ownership stake, they're going to take a piece of the team's revenue. So, folks, I'll open the floor. Who's buying the first round? Is this a good thing or a bad thing for college sports and the ACC?
Go for it, Kenton.
Well, I wanted to let everybody get their point off here, but I'm going to just say this. This is one of the worst things I have ever heard of coming to college sports. Worse than NIL, worse than the transfer portal, worse than I would say the only thing that this could be akin to is the Pac-12 dying. I would say this is on that level of catastrophe for a multitude of reasons. The first and most obvious one being, when is the last time you heard anything good come from a private equity acquisition? When is the last time you heard of a place being acquired by private equity and all of a sudden their service got better, their product got better? You looked up and you said, man, this place was really a dump until private equity acquired it. It's always the exact opposite. Always. It is it's mind-boggling a little bit to see how we're sitting here and having this conversation as if it were a serious conversation about whether or not this is good or bad. This is once again the people at the top putting short-term gains in front of long-term sustainability. This will be a shot in the arm for a lot of teams. A lot of teams will get very good returns up front, but on the long end, the bill will always come due. And when that bill comes due, when those private equity firms come knocking, all of a sudden, red herring equity is taking everything that you got, including some of the research facilities on campus or something crazy like that. Because again, they never tell you, oh, we're private equity. And by the way, we're here to kind of run your business into the ground. That's exactly what we're going to do here. They didn't tell that to Red Lobster, but all of a sudden, all the land it sat on was owned by a different private equity company. Strange how things like that tend to happen when private equity gets involved. And that's never what they say. You're never going to be told, hey, we're going to make things drastically different and potentially exponentially worse, but you'll have fun with it and we'll give you a lot of money up front. That's not how this works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to speak out of turn here, not having a business background whatsoever and strictly just being kind of the sports guy, but now this is a reality that it's becoming a part of college. I would want to know how big of a deal this actually is set to be, or is this just a spinoff of what's now taking place because the House settlement has been agreed upon, because now we're going to be able to pay these players directly for what they're wanting to do, right? Or is this truly going to be the instant model that everybody goes for, is that we want private equity firms to be a part of our universities? I almost feel like that in itself is still too early to be told. I mean, this was a late Friday night news dump that we saw last week, guys. And if I'm not mistaken, none of this actually even goes into effect until July 1st. So all throughout athletic departments this week, I'm sure this has been the busiest week of work that they've had ever, because they're trying to figure out answers to all of these questions. And can we have these phone calls with private equity firms and whatnot to come on in?
Well, I'll go ahead and give my thoughts from Clemson's perspective. And also, little known fact, I have an MBA from Clemson, so 2018, so I know a little
let's
bit.
go, Morgan.
We got a business background here. I have no business background.
Everybody's saying they don't have a business background. I guess I'll say something, but not that I know anything. I just, slept through classes. But I think the thing that is shocking to me is that you're telling me that they're opening up. We originally thought they're opening up money for the player and the university. But what we're seeing is that these private equity firms, these really intelligent, rich groups are saying, well, the money's open up for them. Why isn't the money open up for us? Let's go ahead and get a piece of the pie as well. If you're going to pay revenue to them, why aren't you going to pay back revenue to other people as well, like these firms? Where I could see it being a benefit is those teams that already don't have the fanatics paying with no return on investment anyways. I mean, you've got Alabama, you've got Clemson. These schools have fan bases that have never got any money back. They've been paying into their, into their IPTE and things like that for years and years, decades, centuries, maybe, paying into these universities with no return on investment other than to be able to say, roll Tide or go Tigers, and to be able to say, well, my team won a championship and your team didn't. And that, when you have that kind of fan base that's going to pay regardless, that is a blessing for sure. Clemson has that. But when you have these other teams that don't have that, and NIL is introduced and you're paying the players, what we are seeing is a lot of the fan base is pushing back and saying, you know what, I got a lot of money, but I'll pay the player, but I'm not going to pay blindly with no return on that new facility. I'm going to pay the player instead of facility. So you run out of money for other things. And so that's what I thought was going to hurt Clemson, but it hasn't seemed to really hurt them yet. But you run out of money when it's just fan base with no return on investment. Now, like Kenton was saying, we've got guys in there saying, hey, you know what? We'll give you money, but we want a piece of the pie. We want some of that revenue. And the problem that I see is that what happens when your ticket sales, when your revenue generation does not bring back the return on investment that you were expecting. Now you're going to say, hey, let's say us four at the ACC squad, we have a private equity. We say, you know what, NC State, we're going to buy you a brand new stadium in Raleigh, but we're going to need X amount of money every single season. And guess what? If you don't have a good season, if Dave Doran can't do it, then what happens if revenue generation and ticket sales aren't where they need to be? Then what do? Well, we know that it's not ownership that we can demand, but maybe we go in and say, hey, you remember that dorm room? Now it's a hotel and we own it.
Exactly. That's exactly my point here. I am worried about the back end of this because I'm not just looking at the good days when everything is sunny and everything is rolling in the right direction. As a matter of fact, we could spend a lot of the second block talking about what Jackson said there in terms of even best case scenario, which you could tell Jackson comes from a business family because he's like, oh, they're just going to come in, give it a nice little shot in the arm, and, they'll get a little something in return, and that'll just be the end of it. I'm going to tell
those
you something.
businesses a lot of times fail. I mean, you brought it up. Those businesses fail. But the thing with private equity firms is that they almost don't care. I mean, they do care, but they don't, because all they need is one Facebook.
Yeah, but
they hit a home run one time, they win.
But even in the way that you phrased it, there is so much meat on that bone. And that's why I said we can't talk about all this in the first segment, because when you think about this, what does it look like to trim the fat from a damn college athletics program? What does that look like? What is the fact? Almost everything that you have in a college athletics program needs to be there, or the coaches will argue it needs to be there. I'm a big believer. If you're a ball player, you're a ball player. You don't need no lazy river in the middle of your locker room. You don't need no spaceship-looking locker room to go play ball. But you know who thinks you do? The head coaches, the decision makers, the people who do the recruiting. So I think that there is a much bigger conversation to be had about, okay, best case scenario, what does this look like? Worst case scenario, what does this look like? Because I think that there's a very real possibility that Morgan's situation comes true for plenty of teams out there who are like, please give us just a little something, because private equity will always lend, because they know the house is always going to win.
Well, I think we can continue this conversation about private equity firms and whether it's good or bad for college sports in general and the ACC. So coming up, we'll do exactly that here on the Locked On ACC Squad. There's nothing like the NBA playoffs. In fact, we're actually in the NBA finals between the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Indiana Pacers. The intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you must experience live, and this year's matchups are already delivering. If you want in, Game Time makes it fast and easy to get seats, even for the biggest playoff games. Prices on the app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off, and with killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and no surprise fees, Game Time is a total game changer. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is the Locked On ACC Squad. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. On our panel today, we got Kenton Gibbs, the host of Locked On Wolfpack and former NC State defensive tackle, Morgan Thomas, the host of Locked On Clemson, and JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Duke Blue Devils. And we're going to continue this conversation about private equity firms inserting themselves into college sports after the House settlement recently passed late last week. And I think we're all kind of in agreement here that there is obviously a downside. But one of the perks of a private equity firm, in my opinion, taking over college sports a little bit, is that this is less pressure on the donors. And this goes back to Morgan's point, where donors, when they invest into a team, what is their return on investment? It's saying go team, and hopefully they win. Right. There's no monetary value to them investing into the team. So at some point in time, maybe you do have a crazy super fan that wants to donate all their money and they've made a lot of money, but sometimes you don't. And now you got NIL. And with the revenue sharing, that revenue sharing money used to be for the school to be used on its own facilities. The players could not touch the revenue money. Now, all of a sudden, the House settlement's saying, no, you can pay him $20 million. And most teams, if they want to be competitive, what are they going to do? They're going to spend that $20 million. So now you almost kind of have to do it. Unless you can get a crazy amount of donations, you kind of have to take investments from a private equity firm, in my opinion, because how are you going to – here's the question I have for you all. How do, like, the smaller schools out there, how do they pay to the cap of their revenue sharing, but also be able to upgrade their facilities and maintain them so they can actually get recruits in the building?
You don't. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but there have been haves and have-nots for as long as college football has existed, and this will not stop that. As a matter of fact, I have a feeling this will be the hyper-acceleration of the exacerbation of that. And sorry to use all those big words, but you get the point. This is doing nothing but speeding the train down the rails of the crazy train track. I am looking at this and I'm saying to myself, there are going to be teams that are like, you know what? We need the money. Let's take the money. But they know good and darn well they can't pay that money back. They know good and darn well we are one bad year away. We are one bad coach away from not being able to pay it back. And I'll use an example out of the ACC, who's not represented today because Brian Smith ain't showed his face since his boys went 2-10. He ain't, he don't want to be around here no more. But Florida State, right? Florida State is already super deeply leveraged in terms of building a new stadium and a potential buyout for Norvell coming up here if they have another bad season. And you're going to have to pay a new coach. And you're talking Florida State coach money. You're not going to be able to lure a coach from a much less desirable place on the idea of, well, this is Florida State, and we'll pay you the same as what you were getting there. But when we get done paying for the stadium and paying Norvell, we're going to get you right. We're going to set you straight. That's not – people aren't going for that. So then what happens, right? Oh, we're for sure going to be better. We'll take this private equity money, and we're going to the Big Ten anyway. We're going to get lots of money from them. And then you get to the Big Ten and become a middle-of-the-pack team. Or you stay in the ACC, and you continue to have down years. You go through your dark ages as a program. Not saying that this is guaranteed to happen. I'm just saying, hypothetically, they go through their dark ages as a program, and attendance is as low as it's ever been. Viewership is low as it's ever been. How then do you pay back that money? When they were expecting Florida State viewership, they looked at the past 20 years and said, this is what your viewership has been. Clemson goes back to Clemsoning being a thing. What do you do if you take private equity money and then all of a sudden you're no longer a national powerhouse like you were? NC State, same thing for us. It's not any different for any university here. The premise of what I'm saying is we are, at the end of the day, I'm looking at this and I'm saying the smaller schools accept where you are and try to build within that. This temporary shot in the arm, I'm going to tell you a phrase that my grandmother tells all of her children and all of her grandchildren whenever she knows we're up to something we shouldn't be. Whenever she hears bad things about our names in the church or in the streets, wherever, she says, boy, you keep dancing with the devil and one day it's going to follow you home. This is a moment where these schools making these deals with private equity, not only are they dancing, they two-stepping, they tangoing, they walking it out, they doing the boots on the ground, they doing the electric slide, whatever, the hokey shuffle, whatever white folk dances are, they doing all of them all in one. They river dancing out here because I'm telling you, this is a bad deal to get in bed with private equity.
Yeah, I mean, now I'm thinking more, Kenton, about, okay, to fix this, trimming what is the fat? What is the fat that you then within an athletic department? Does it become salaries at that point? Because then I really worry about, well, there are so many people inside athletic departments that your everyday fan has no idea even exists that makes
that already barely get
successful.
Paid.
Right.
Well, the issue is, JJ, is that I hear your points, but that revenue money is now going to the players. So something's got to give here. Someone might lose their job no matter what.
This is wild, man.
But that's where I'm so interested in seeing what does the fat look like before we even get to, hey, this is what the injection does. Does the fat become the least valuable sports? Because let's be very honest about this. I love watching sports in competition in all facets. We can all be honest and say women's sports are most likely to be on that chopping block of which ones are least profitable.
It's not just that. It's literally, with the exception of every program around the country, they're always going to have their outlier sport, but it's really football and some programs with men's basketball, and then every other sports of them is really not profitable.
So what then happens? We have this fun title. It's the one after 8 and before 10 that makes sure that we have to pay out, that we have to protect these programs for women's sports as well. So what then happens? What is the fact that private equity is going to trend? You know, you talk about the operations guys, you talk about the equipment guys and gals and all that good stuff, and they're already not making that much. And we know when companies want to trim fat, the first place they do it is head count. Where's the head count that you can pull out of college football and be like, oh, we're still good here? Where's the head count you can pull from a college basketball team and say, oh, yeah, you don't need a second or third trainer. Y'all can all get taped up by one trainer like they did in the 80s, and you'll be okay.
Right. Yeah, all the media PR people that you've got within your athletic department. I mean, there are just so many different areas, photographers, video, everybody that you've got there. Because salary would be the obvious way to go, right? Like, I don't know, because it's been a college athletic department that's been looking to fundraise to fund, for out history. I don't know where that large chunk of money would be other than salary.
What about scholarship count?
Yeah, I think it's going to be salary outside of college football, as y'all are mentioning. I think that the smaller schools are the schools that are just trying to get by, that maybe only have enough donors to pay for the football players and nothing else. What they're going to do is they're going to maybe no longer have a baseball team. Maybe they'll no longer have a basketball team. They may not have a softball team or a volleyball team, because that private equity firm is going to say, you know what, we need our money back, and you're spending it in areas that you don't need. Another thing that I'm going to be disgusted by, that has already really basically happened, but it's going to get worse, is that everything is going to be sponsored. Your first time out is going to be sponsored by it's not going to be Death Valley. It's going to be Bob's Chicken presented Death Valley. It's going to be, every little thing is going to have some sponsorship to it. I mean, that's why I watch the Atlanta Braves and I have to see them with a big giant concrete logo on the side of their uniform. It's the same thing. You're going to see what happens in Europe sports and overseas, and what's happening in MLS. You're not even going to see the team name. You're going to see Motorola. You're going to see Emirates. You're going to see Delta, whatever it's going to be. Everything is going to be sponsored in order to try to make up all that loss of revenue or get back their money.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to say anything, because you owe that money. And they're going to be pushing you to do that. So that's going to really hurt the tradition. Howard's Rock sponsored by Bud Light, whatever it may be. It's going to be literally everything out there. I can see it happening. And with the smaller schools, that's the unfortunate thing. But I think what really it all boils down to is that you're eventually going to have the haves, which we already have, but you're going to have some of those teams saying, you know what? We're going to drop down out of this league, and we're going to go play the lower level, college football, where we can hang, because we cannot hang and we cannot afford the payback all the loans to keep up with the Power 4 or the Power 5 or whatever. So there's going to be some teams out there, maybe, I don't want to name specific teams, but there are going to be smaller teams that are going to struggle, that already have a fan base that can't keep up. They're going to finally say, probably, you know what, y'all have a 64 team, but we'll be the 65th team out of here.
Hey, all I know is make sure if you're touching Howard's Rock, you touch it responsibly. Okay, that's what I know. If we're touching Howard's Rock presented by Bud Light. But you make a very interesting point there, and honestly, that to me is the least of our worries. Like, I kid you not, if somebody told me, Kenton, the bad thing out of this deal would be that we have sponsorship like Teams of Europe, I don't give a damn. I'm sorry. Hey, I'm terrified of the Delta Bulldogs. Hey, that's a team that I don't want to face.
The Clemson Tigers, presented by Coors Light.
That's what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with all of these ugly designs all over the jerseys, and we can barely even tell which team plays for which, because like in soccer, teams change colors year to year based on who they're sponsoring.
Like NASCAR.
Exactly. If that's the case, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with like the jerseys being ugly or whatever. What I would not want, what would disturb me more than anything else, is the cutting of other sports and the potential that Morgan just brought up, which I didn't even consider, of, hey, we're actually going to pull resources from your university outside of sports. Because what is more important than sports to me, I know the sports changed my life. I know that without football, I would not have gotten a college degree. But guess what? Football allowed me to get a college degree that meant something. So if the college degree no longer means as much, or if it becomes a situation where, dorms are not being properly kept up, or facilities around campus are not being properly upkept, or you're having to pull from your allotment for where you're buying your food from and stuff like that for campus, that becomes a problem for me, because now we're putting people in deleterious situations based on sports, when to me, sports should always be an extracurricular. It should benefit the university, if anything, or at worst be a net zero. You should never be pulling from the university for sports.
I know we got to get to break, but I'm thinking about a Duke basketball jersey with the sponsorship logo on it, and I'm sick. I mean, I'll get over it, but it just, to your point, Morgan, jerseys. What are we doing?
The Bojangle Blue Devils, baby. The Bojangle Devils. We love
like
it.
the NBA Finals. You see more YouTube TV ads than you actually see the NBA Finals logo, or you're watching the Stanley Cup, and instead of the Stanley Cup logo on there, you see like some random advertisement. But hey, for like 2 minutes during the second period or whatever, or 2 minutes in the second quarter of basketball, they might just flash the trophy a little bit for you just to like give you that old nostalgia, but you know it's not the real thing.
The Bojangles Blue Devils. How about it?
Hey, the yellow and red jerseys would be hilarious. I'm not going to lie to you. That would be the part that sends me over the edge.
It's gonna be the Jim Boeheim court presented by McDonald's in the JMA Wireless Dome. I'm just ready for it. Even though there's no McDonald's on the Syracuse campus. Fun fact.
Wow, that's tough.
Big missed opportunity by McDonald's. What the heck are they? You have to be on every single college campus if you're a fast food chain. What are you thinking?
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Money. Well, I think that concludes our conversation here about private equity in college sports. Short term, it might be good. Long term, if you can't pay the bill, that's not going to be very good for these schools. Coming up, we'll talk about the biggest offseason surprise for each of our college football teams. So stick with us here on the Locked On ACC Squad. This is the Locked On ACC Squad. Jackson Holzer, host of Locked On Syracuse. Kenton Gibbs, host of Locked On Wolfpack. Former NC State defensive tackle Morgan Thomas, host of Clemson Tigers. And JJ Jackson, the host of Locked On Duke Blue Devils. Let's get into the biggest offseason surprise for each team in college football this offseason. So who wants to buy the first round? What was the biggest surprise of your guys' offseason?
Oh, I'll definitely say mine was in terms of college football, it would definitely be the fact that we only had attrition from one side of the ball at NC State. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. Like, yes, Kevin Concepcion is a big loss, but you kept the entire band together on offense. You get back Hollywood Smothers. You get back Noah Rogers. You get back CJ Bailey, the shot caller, the guy who mixes the drink on the offensive end. But defensively, Coach Gibson left before the bowl game, where it was announced he was leaving before the bowl game. And then you didn't hear any movement from our defense, literally right up until the 11th hour. Like, it was the day before the portal closed. Our entire defensive backfield that was supposed to be coming back all got in at the same time. So that was a little surprising for me, not just that the entire defensive back room did a mass exodus at once, but that we didn't lose anybody but KC from offense. And then defensively, everybody and their mama said, hey, see you. It's been real. It's been fun. Y'all be safe.
From the Duke perspective, a big surprise just in what they were able to do at quarterback, bringing Darian Mensah in from Tulane. The numbers that are out there in terms of what Duke is paying the guy are astronomical and crazy. Like, who thought Duke would be this big-time spender in football? But shout out to Manny Diaz for what he was able to do in year one. I think that's kind of the big talk, is can you duplicate that in your second season? We had the same song and dance just 2 years ago as Mike Elko was preparing for his year two. And now, guys, I'm a little worried. Like, are we going to have another great second year? And then Duke football's going to have to look for another coach because somebody else is going to come and poach Manny Diaz. I'm cautious right now going into the season for Duke because I'm tired of seeing other teams take your head coach.
JJ, that's a good problem to have.
Great problem to have. Great problem.
For me, on the Clemson perspective, I think that it has to be Dabo Swinney finally using the transfer portal. I know you probably aren't shocked by me saying that. Not only did he hire a brand new defensive coordinator in Tom Allen, but most of the fans were demanding that at this point. So it really wasn't too big of a shock. But definitely when I woke up and realized on my X feed that Tristan Smith, JUCO from Southeast Missouri State, wide receiver with almost 1,000 yards receiving, had entered the transfer portal and had gone to Clemson and selected the Tigers, I was like, okay, well, you know, he's using the portal. This guy seems like he's not just a clipboard holder on the sideline, but, you know, he is from a lower division. And then we beat out Texas A&M to get Purdue's freshman superstar defensive end Will Help. That was the biggest shocker to me, because you're not winning that without a little bit of wetting the beak there, as my old boss used to say. So very shocking that Clemson went into the portal. Also that Dabo Swinney, admitted defensive end was a problem and went into the portal and beat a big time player for it. It was a big shock for all of us.
Oh,
These are all good things
my
that you
team
guys are
has
mentioning.
exactly. My team has defensive end problems, even though we got a first rounder at defensive end. You spare me a defensive end, please. Send one up to Raleigh.
You
we
need
need
two.
one.
You do
That's
need
what I'm
One
saying.
too. I mean, we'll do it.
We
didn't have
need
two, but
we don't even need two. Just give us one. Just give us one. You keep the one you like the most, which I'm guessing is going to be Parker. Just give us help. Give us somebody, because we ain't got no pass rushers right now.
we
We'll
had
take a
one,
body.
and when we only had one, Louisville decided they were going to run that direction and really hurt us. So did Georgia. And South Carolina to kind of cap it all off. So hopefully the running game issues have been corrected with this change.
All right, so you guys all went. I'll go last here. Sorry, Syracuse fans. I have to bring it up again. Losing Trevor Pena was a huge shock. I did not see that one coming at all. I remember it. It was late April. The spring portal was opening up later that afternoon. I'm making breakfast, and I get a text that, like a WTF text. And I checked Twitter, and it's Trevor Pena entering the portal. The guy was a team captain. If he was going to leave, I felt it might be in December when most players leave, especially the star players. When he entered the portal, I got to tell you, that was the biggest offseason surprise I had. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. I do think that they did a nice job trying to replace him with getting a guy like Jonte Cook, who's got a lot of upside. But that being said, if you're talking about the Syracuse football biggest offseason surprise, Trevor Pena leaving, the fact that he was named a team captain and then just walked out the door, I did not see that one coming. Final thoughts from any of you guys?
Wow, I'm so surprised that winning Steve Angeli wasn't the biggest surprise for you. I know he's got ties to your offensive coordinator and whatnot. He's the shot caller. That should be your big surprise. No, but seriously, I think that this has been a very interesting offseason. And I'll tell you, there are multiple teams in the ACC that got better by doing little to nothing. Shout out to Louisville. Shout out to Georgia Tech. Those are two teams that did not have a ton of very big name guys leave. And even with Georgia Tech having Singleton leave at wideout, I think they'll still be okay. I really and truly do, because they've got a ton of talent there. But Louisville, that backfield, keeping both of those backs, hey, I'm going to tell you, they were one Stanford loss away from really giving some folks some problems last year. So I'm very interested to see what they do this year.
So this has been the Locked On ACC squad. Jackson Holzer, Locked On Syracuse, Kenton Gibbs, Locked On Wolfpack, Morgan Thomas, Locked On Clemson, and JJ Jackson, Locked On Duke Blue Devils. If you can all do us all a favor, since you've made it this far in the podcast, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, helps the channels grow and reach all of our wonderful fan bases. And also for your second listen, you might want to check out the Locked On Portal podcast with football recruiting expert Brian Smith, also the host of Locked On Florida State Seminoles, who, Kenton said it earlier on in the podcast, ever since Florida State went 2-10,
ran away.
He's nowhere to be found. Now, I imagine that when Florida State next season at one point is 8-1, pause for laughter, he will be on the podcast, because they're not going 8-1. That was the whole point. But anyways, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Locked On ACC Squad.